So here we are, we're sitting on our virtual machine manager system for our newly deployed VM running Windows Server 2019. So we're meeting some of the minimal requirements for what we need. So first off, as I mentioned, we're running Windows Server 2019. This system currently only has 2 cores in it. As far as the virtual machine, it has 4 GB of memory, and we're running with about 326 GB of storage space. So we're going to try it with this minimal installation right now and see how far we get, or if it complains about us not meeting some of these requirements. So one of the first things you're going to need to do is actually go and source the ISO for System Center 2019 Virtual Machine Manager. And you can do that, get that a number of ways. So if you've already purchased the System Center 2019 suite of products, you can just go and probably download that from the Microsoft Volume License Center or Volume License Key Center. Go download that from there. Another option, if you're trying to evaluate it, you can download the ISO from Microsoft's Evaluation Center. And then a third option, maybe if you subscribe to something like Visual Studio or MSDN subscriptions, you can download the ISO through those avenues as well. So I've already go ahead and downloaded the ISO. So let's jump over to File Explorer, and we have our ISO here. So I'm just going to go ahead and mount this ISO on the system. So I'm going to right click on it and click Mount. And you see here we actually have an executable. So we need to actually double click on this and extract all the files for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and agree to the licensing terms. So Microsoft Evaluation Software terms, blah, 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 blah. Say next. And then I need to specify a path where I want it to extract to. So in my case, I'm going to extract it to my E drive. So I have an extra drive letter on my system for E. Or you can do the C or whatever drive you have available. And I'm just going to let that extract. So that should just take a couple seconds, hopefully. It doesn't take too long. Let that finish. As you can see, the ISO is only about a gigabyte download. So it's not terribly large. And we're almost done. There we go. So once that finishes, you simply click Finish. And now I'm just going to jump over to my E drive. Now I have the System Center Virtual Machine Manager folder. Go into the folder. And we see several different files here. So here I just want to run my setup. So out of habit, a lot of times what I'll do, as opposed to just double clicking on that, I'll make sure that I'm running as a system or as an account that is a local admin on the server that I'm using. And then also I may run it from an elevated command prompt, just in case if there is various different security policies in place on the system that sometimes they can interfere with certain installations. One of the ways you may want to do it is open up an elevated command prompt, copy that path where you just extracted the software to. So I'm just going to go change it to that path. I'm going to change it to that path, so I do CD and paste the path in that I copied. And at least I thought I copied it. Like I don't have it. Let's go and try to copy that again. Copy. Paste. Weird. Okay. Alright, let's just type it out. So E drive. I can type. Alright. TRR, so go to my System Center folder. And then I'm just going to run the setup.exe that's there. Alright, that brings us to this prompt. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that command prompt now. And so it has some things saying, hey, before you begin, that'll send you out to the documentation page so you can read some of the minimum requirements and things like that we've already gone over. So we won't waste any time on that here. We'll just go ahead and click Install. I'll go ahead and extract some temporary files and launch the installer. Alright, so the first thing we get here, we get some prompts is that if we want to install the Virtual Machine Manager server in the console or one or the other. So I'm going to actually install both the Virtual Machine Manager server as well as the VMM console. And you see there's a note here down at the bottom that this feature requires a SQL Server database and Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit for Windows 10. And then it has a link for the installation requirements for that software package. I'm going to say next. In here, I need to provide name, organization, and a product key. So for the purpose of this, I actually won't. I don't have a product key handy right here that I want to use, but I will just type in my organization name, and then I will leave the product key blank. That'll effectively make the software go into evaluation mode, which I believe is for about 180 days. So after that 180 days, the product will stop functioning. So I need to put in my product key before that time. Again, we have some licensing terms. Read through that. Check I have read and understood and agree with the terms. Click next. And now this screen here is just telling us, hey, the product may collect various different usage and diagnostic and performance data and submit that back up to Microsoft over the internet. So it doesn't give you the option to turn that off on this screen. It's just letting you know that the product does do that. But once you have the product installed, you do have an option to opt out of that if you don't want to send that data over. So we'll go say next. And then next is asking us if we want to use Microsoft Update or not. So typically I disable Microsoft Update for these type of products or System Center products in general. So sometimes the update rollups and things that they make available, they may require post installation steps. So if you let Windows Update install those updates, and if you're not aware that Windows Update has installed that, you may leave your installation in a incomplete state. So in general, I normally turn that feature off. So I'm going to turn that off and say next. And then finally, it's asking us where do we want to install it. For this system, I'll leave it on the C drive. Let it go on the C. Then it goes through and do some prereqs. So we're getting an error here, so it's telling me I need the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. So that was that link at the top that I pointed out before we install. So it's telling me that we need to download that and install that before we can continue. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the link here. And let's go ahead and add that to the trusted sites. Yeah, it's going to prompt me a lot for this. So we're getting these prompts. Again, this is a new installation, and Internet Explorer Enhanced Security is enabled. So anytime I hit any of these sites that's requesting certain information, it actually blocks it unless I approve of it. So I'm just going to approve these sites as it's asking me. Okay, so now let's close this one and let's go try this link ID again. Alright, more sites need to approve. Or your other option would be you could just temporarily disable Internet Explorer Enhanced Security so you don't have to go through all these prompts. How you do that, if you wanted to do that, is back on Server Manager, over here on the right hand side, you have this IE Enhanced Security Configuration option. You can turn that to off, right? Just off for the administrator, since I'm logging in as administrator. Say OK. And then I don't have to relaunch IE. So I'm actually going to do that so I can stop getting prompted for all of this. So I'll be all day telling it approve. So I'm going to just copy the link, close IE, reopen IE. So you see I get the message telling me enhanced security configuration is not enabled. And now I'm just going to go to that same website again. Okay, now the site loaded without all of the various different prompts that I already getting. So I'm going to go and download whatever the latest version that's available. So it looks like this one, 1903 is the latest one here. So I'll go ahead and download that. And it's saying it's 1.83 megabytes. So I think it's 1.83 megabytes just for the setup. And then once the setup runs, it's going to go and fetch the rest of the pieces. And you see one note here is that it's saying Windows 80K for Windows 10 version 1909 will not be released. So 1903 is the latest available. And you can use the 1903 to deploy Windows 10 version 1909, as well as hopefully it will be compatible with System Center 2019 that we're trying to deploy now. So let's go do that. And I'm just going to take the defaults for this. So here, actually, you can actually have it just directly install it, or you can have it download the bits. So actually, I'm going to actually have it download the bits in my case, just because if I need to deploy it on another system, I don't want to have to keep downloading this over and over. And it looks like it's a fairly large download, over a little bit over a gig. So I'm going to download it to the disk, and then we're going to manually run the installation to install it. So let's go and do that now. And I'm going to say no, I don't want to send anonymous data. Say next. Have another license agreement. Accept. And then we're off to the races and let that run. So this may run for a few minutes. So we're going to let this go through, install, do everything it needs to do. And then we'll continue on, as opposed to boring you with long, laborious installation. So the download has completed, and so I'm just going to go say close. Then I'm going to go and browse to my download folder where it extracted to. So we'll go downloads, window kits, 10, 80K, and now we have our installer here. So I'm going to run the 80K setup again. And this time I want to select the install option. And I'm going to let this go to the C drive as well. Say next. And again, I don't want to send anonymous data. Say next. Licensing terms, accept. And now on this step, we got to select the various different pieces that I need for the installation. So in the case of Virtual Machine Manager, it requires a couple different pieces. So here, you don't necessarily need all of these pieces that are showing like checked by default. So for VMM, we need the deployment tools, and I believe we need the Windows pre-installation environment pieces, which I don't see a name that actually says that in this particular version, so I'm not quite sure which piece it is. So I'm pretty sure I don't need this performance toolkit. Don't need this. Don't need anything with AppV. Pretty sure I don't need user state migration. Configuration designer. Not sure if I need that or not either. I'm just gonna go ahead and install those two pieces. Probably gonna end up with more than I need, but once this finishes installing, I'll go run the prereq check again in Virtual Machine Manager and see if that's enough to get the installer going. Like this will be just a few more moments here to get this installed. Alright, so that installed successfully, so I'm not going to launch the getting started guide. I'm just going to close that out, minimize this down, close my browser window, and I'm just going to check prerequisites again and see if it's happy now. Oh, still not happy, so like I still need something else. So what are we missing? So let's go back to our setup. I'm going to change. And yeah, it's not really telling me exactly what it wants. So, so I think something has changed as far as the Windows assessment deployment kit. So I remember in previous releases there used to be a checkbox here for the pre-installation environment, and I noticed in this one that's nowhere to be found. So my guess is, well, it's not even a guess. I actually see the problem now. They have a note here on the website where it says, where did I just see it at? So new as of Windows 10 version 1809, Windows pre-installation environment is available separately from the assessment and download kit. So actually what it sounds like I need to download is this separate package that they provide now. So the documentation that you see there is actually slightly wrong, that you see in the installer itself, right? Because it's really telling you, hey, download the Windows assessment and deployment kit, but in reality, we need this other package that used to be part of Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit is what we need to install. So let's go and download and do that. So here it will be download the Windows PE add-on for the 80K. So I'm going to run the setup for this. And again, instead of installing it directly, I'm going to download it first. So like it's a bit bigger, so like it requires 2.8 gigabyte of free space. So I'm going to say next. Again, I'm not going to send anonymous data, accept the licensing term, and now we're off to the races for it to install. So yeah, we'll let this run, let this install, and then we'll come back and run the installation, and hopefully this will be the correct thing, because yeah, the documentation, or at least the error prompt here, is not fully clear that, hey, it's a separate package now. So essentially what we need the deployment tools. That was from that package I initially installed, so that part is already there. And what I'm still missing is this Windows PE environment piece that I'm downloading now, and once that finishes downloading, we'll go and install that. So now that our download is complete, I'm going to go ahead and say close, and then I'm just going to jump back over to the File Explorer, go to my downloads, Windows Kits 10. In this case, this time I'm going to go to the 80K WinPE add-ons folder, and I'm going to run the setup here. I'm going to go ahead and install. This looks like it requires about 5.7 gigabyte of free space. Say next. I'm not going to send anonymous usage data. Say next. Licensing term again. And in this case, there we go. Now we have Windows pre-installation environment, which is the requirement for this. So I'm going to go and let that install. So this is going to take a few minutes to install. Once that completes, we'll try the prereq again and see if the installer is happy and ready to go to the next step. So like that installed successfully. Let's go ahead and close it and let's try it again. This has been a lot of trial and error here. So let's go back here, check prerequisites again. And okay, so it passed that. So now it's asking for SQL command line utilities. So it's what the SQL Server 2012 command line utilities from SQL Server 2012 feature pack, or the 2014 versions of it. So my SQL version that I'm going to use, I believe, is 2016. But since this is explicitly calling out 2012 or 2014, I'm going to go with the 14 ones, and hopefully that fulfills the requirement. Alright, so it sent me to this download link, Utilities 14 for SQL Server. I'm going to download. I'll go with the 64-bit version. Let's just try that. Say next. This looks like it's a relatively small download. So now I'm getting this pop-up, so I'm going to go ahead and allow the pop-up. And go ahead and download this package here. Save it, and then I'm going to run it. And so this has a separate prereq. So now I need to go and find the Microsoft ODBC driver 11 for SQL Server before I can install that. So this is sending me on a wild goose chase almost. Like, so there's prereqs for prereqs that's not on the CD that I have to go and download off the web before I can continue to these additional steps. So let's go and do a search and find this Microsoft ODBC driver. Alright, so Microsoft ODBC driver 11 for SQL Server. Let's search for that. And let's add the word download as well. There we go. That first link looks good to me. So let's go download that. Again, I'm going to go with the 64-bit version. Let's say next. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to run it. Alright, so let's go and next, accept agreement, next. Just going to next through this installation real quick. Okay, that installed very quick. And now let's go back to my downloads, and let's run that command line util program again. And this still is not happy. So that installed fine, but still not liking it. So let's try the 32-bit version. I wonder if that will make any difference. It doesn't really specify. Let's just try it. Save it again. And I'm going to run it. Okay, it's not supported. I guess since I'm on a 64-bit OS. Okay, so that makes sense. Alright, so I'm at somewhat of a standstill on what this is not liking, right? So if I run my prereqs again, still fails. So still it's looking for something, right, that I don't have. And the command line utilities is looking for something I don't have. But I just installed what the error message is saying, but it's still not working. Right, so there may be some improvements for some of these error messages and things that are popping up where they don't quite match exactly what it needs, these error messages. So let's go, let's try again. So this link is for a newer version of the ODBC drivers. I don't know if that will make any difference if I get a newer version than what it's telling me. Again, it's trial and error at this point. So I'm going to download these bits. I'm going to save it again. I'm going to run it. And this has a different prereq. So, yeah, this could be documented quite a bit better, ideally. But so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go figure out exactly what's wrong here, and then we'll be back with a solution. Okay, so after a little bit of trial and error, I was able to figure it out. So there's some problems with the error messages that pop up. So for example, the error message that I get told me to install ODBC driver 11, right? And then it told me to install the SQL command line utilities 14. So when I downloaded SQL command line 14 from the Microsoft link, the package that comes down is actually 13, right? And then if I try to go install that, the error message tells me to install ODBC driver 11, which again, it doesn't work. So I end up in a circular logic. So what I actually end up doing is installing ODBC SQL driver 13, right? And command line 13, which actually says 14, which is kind of weird. It's kind of confusing. Error messages don't really match what you actually need, and the versions that it's throwing and telling you to need is not actually what I needed in my case. So I may have done something wrong, but once I install 13 command line with 13 ODBC, like everything is happy, even though the error message says 14 and 11. So don't ask me. It's bad installer. it's all the way what I can chop it up to. So now we're at a point where it's telling me I have a pending restart. So I'm going to go and allow the server to restart, and then I'm going to relaunch the installer and try to continue from there. Catch you on the other side. Alright, so we've gone and rebooted the system, relaunched the installer, and now we're about to try it again. So I'm going to select my features I want, the virtual machine manager server as well as the console. Click next. Need to provide an organization and a product key. I'm going to leave the product key blank so I can go into evaluation mode for now. Accept the product licensing agreement. turning off Microsoft Update, installing to the C drive. There we go. Okay. So now it looks like I'm good on all of those prerequisite pieces. So now it's prompting me for the database configuration. So you would have to have already pre-prepped a SQL server to deploy the virtual machine manager database to. So in my case, I have already done that. I already have an existing SQL server. So I'm going to use my SQL Server 2016 server. I'm going to leave the port as is. See, can I connect? Looks like I was able to connect successfully to it. So I see my instance name. And then I need to provide the database with a name. So for mine, I'm actually going to prefix this or suffix this with 2019 Pride. Because typically I have various different deployments of whatever system I'm running. So I normally have production, a development, and possibly a UAT for a lot of environments. And sometimes I may use the same SQL database instance, or I may move them around. So to make it obvious on what that database is, so I don't mix them up, I typically will put an additional tag on the database name so I know what I'm looking at. So in this case, this will be Virtual Machine Manager 2019, and this will be a production instance. So now I need to configure a service account and the distributed key management. For this, you can use a local system account or a domain account. Or as you can see, now it supports group managed service account. So the advantage of using group managed service account is that the password will be managed for you if you leverage that feature. So if you have a policy within your organization where you need to rotate passwords on some type of particular policy, group managed service account is a good solution to alleviate those manual tasks from the administrators. So where the servers and the services themselves will rotate those passwords for those services automatically for you. But the configuration of that is beyond the scope of what we'll talk about here. So I will just use a traditional username and password for my service account. So let's go and do that. I'm going to use, what's that service in? I think it is CC. I need to put in my super secure password. Alright, so we have our username and password. And then as far as distributed key management, that comes into play if you have a requirement for a highly available deployment of Virtual Machine Manager. So distributed key management in this context will be beyond the scope of what I'll talk about during this discussion. But just keep in mind is that what it is that what it will do is publish a key into encryption keys into Active Directory, and then the virtual machine manager servers that are participating in the highly available cluster or instance of virtual machine manager will be able to retrieve that key from AD in order to encrypt passwords and usernames and things like that in the SQL Server database. But in this case, we'll just be using storing those keys on the local server, since this particular deployment will not be highly available. It will just be a standalone virtual machine server for this particular case. So we'll go ahead and say next. Could not be verified. Okay. So it doesn't tell me exactly what the error is, but I suspect it's that the domain account is a member of the administrator groups on the local computer. That account is not a local administrator, so let me go and fix that right now. So I'm just going to hop over to computer management. I'm going to go to local users and groups, and then to administrators. And then under administrators, I'll hit add, and then I want to just put in my account that I want to use. So I just want to type in my username and add that in. And let's hop back over to the installer. Let's get this out the way. Go back to the installer and let's try to hit next again. Oh, still not happy. Alright, so did I do my password wrong? There we go. Okay, I had fat fingered the password. All right, so next, this here will, where we configure our ports. So I'm going to just let it use all of the default ports that it typically uses. So I'm going to leave everything at defaults and say next. And then it's prompted me to create a new library share. So you can either use an existing share or create a new one. So I'm going to allow it to create a new one. But one change, I don't want it on my C drive. So I'm going to actually go and select. I'm going to put this on my E drive. And I'm just going to go ahead and stage that folder path like it was trying to do by default. So I'm going to say new. And I'm just going to make a folder name Virtual Machine Manager Library Files. Say OK. And I'll leave everything else as is. Say next. And well, before I continue here, so ideally, you should have, like in a real true deployment for production, you should have a highly available file share where you'll be showing your library. And ideally on a separate server, right? Or you may have multiple. You can always add an additional library server later, but just keep that in mind. But for this, it'll just be a standalone running on the local server. And I get a preview of all of the steps it's about to do, and I'll say install. So we'll give that several minutes to run, and then we will continue on to the next parts. Finally, we have a successful installation. So VMM Management Server successful, VMM Console successful. So here I'm going to uncheck this box for update, so I don't want it to go and update anything at this point. And I'm just going to go ahead and allow it to open the console. Let's close out of the setup. And it's going to go ahead and connect over localhost. Let's say connect. And there we are. Now we're successfully running VMM 2019. We're on the 180-day trial. And as you can see, there's nothing in this particular instance. There's no managed hosts, there's no managed VMs of any type at this point. So up here at the top, there's a few different options: create VM, create cloud, create VM network. So I'm not going to do any of that yet. I'm going to jump over to my fabric, go to all hosts, and I want to add a Hyper-V host. So in this case, Windows Server Computer in a trusted Active Directory domain. The domain where my host is actually untrusted. It's not trusted by this particular domain. And I'm going to go next. And it's asking me for a run as account. So I haven't created any run as accounts or anything, so I'm going to go and create that now at this time. I'm going to create a new run as account. And it's going to be for it's a different domain. Provide an account that's authoritative for that domain. Let's see, try that again. If I can type properly. And since this is an untrusted domain, it won't actually be able to validate those credentials at this point. Alright, so I have credentials I can use. Let me say next. Then I'm going to type in the fully qualified name for one of my hosts. Say add. Hopefully I can reach that from here. Look like it did find something. Say next. And I'm just going to leave it in all hosts view. So you can make additional folders and folder structure, however you want to do that to put your hosts in. And then also you could specify some default paths where VMM will place VMs as you create them. But again, in my case, I'm going to just leave all of that blank. Say next and say finish. So now what I'll try to do in the background is remotely connect to that Hyper-V host, deploy the virtual machine manager agent onto the system, and then configure it to be managed by this VMM 2019 instance. So that will take a few minutes to go through. It may fail, it may be successful. We won't know until it fully goes through and complete. Just in case if there's like various different firewall rules that may be blocking exactly what it's trying to do. We need to give it some time to go through and see if it's successful. So let's give it a few minutes and I'll be right back. So like we're getting some success here. A few of the jobs have completed. We're at 99%. Well, back to 87% now. Alright, so look like some of the things were successful, but then it failed on something near the end here. So something returned access denied, unauthorized, ensure the HTTP servers in the agent are installed and running. Multipath IO is not enabled. We'll need to manually enable that. Add a certificate. So it looked like it was half successful, but failed overall. But the host does show up now. Like I am getting data from that host. So something failed, but something was successful, right? The host is under management now. Like I'm seeing some data about the storage, seeing some data about the OS, how much memory it has. That's the gist of it. This wasn't 100% success. Ran into some various different snags, obviously, as far as some issues with the documentation, as far as the installer. Some changes as far as the Windows assessment deployment kit, where they have removed the pre-installation environment from that initial package, so you have to download 2 different packages in order to do the install. But outside of that, like we're in decent shape. Status of the VM is starting to come over. Like we have a few warnings on a few things, some WI performance counters that may be, again, that may be something related to the firewall on that system where it's blocking that particular data. We've got hardware data flowing in. Got some details about the storage. It detected the 2 different virtual switches that are on that system. See if we hop over to VM and services. Still don't see any VMs. Oh wait, there you go. Now they are starting to come up here. So like we're in pretty good shape here. VM is up. Like 2 of the VMs don't have supported configuration per what VMM supports. All the VMs on this system are stopped. So like we're in good shape. So I'm just gonna kind of put the cherry on top. Just make sure I can start one of these VMs up. So this is a music kiosk VM. And like we're able to get that going pretty quickly right away. So like this install has been a success. There are a few things that I need to investigate as far as the firewall and the WMI performance collection on this particular host. But outside of that, we have a successful VMM installation and we're good to go. Hopefully this session has been useful. I know I learned a few things while making it, and hopefully you learned a few things too. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.